Well, we've overrun a bit, but I thought it was important to get all the projects described adequately because I think they're all each fascinating. And it seems to me that there are two common threads that, Matthew, you were mentioning just now, which is a relationship to nature and the relationship between nature and health, and whether nature can actually act as healing. Now, in some ways, that's most explicit in the eye hospital, which is, a very sophisticated medical facility with all sorts of other things as well. But at the root, it's about pioneering eye care, and each of the others were about relating people with challenging lives, whether it's the patients in Sandro's village in Hakaplat, or indeed indigenous people who are often marginalised in a city like Toronto. And at AHMM's Holloway Prison, it's people, it's a record really of people who are imprisoned there, who are often victims of social forces, either by being excluded from voting or by social economic deprivation. So all of these are about trying to find a way for complex, challenged communities to find their way back through a relationship with nature and indeed improved health. And I wonder, given that we're up against time, if I could just ask each of you to say a few words about that, perhaps starting, Sandro, with you.
Yes, I think something we learned specifically from the project is that ideally, we try not to change the way people live too much because it just confuses them a lot. So what we tried to do was to kind of allow these people to go on with their daily lives with dignity and not change too much.
Rafa.
Hi. I think with our site, there's not much space for landscape. It takes up the whole site. It's like 46,000 square meters on 4,000 square meter site. But what we've done therefore is to try to bring the landscape and nature into the building itself. So you would have seen the images of sort of biophilia, the trees growing, planting inside the atrium, which is treated as sort of inside-outside space. And then also the roof terrace, which provides a fantastic resource for staff and students. But there we've really tried to maximize the biodiversity and nature there. So in a way, we've taken the ground plane and put it up onto the 6th floor. And then as the master plan is built out, we work with the other developers in the surrounding area to kind of really create a lively and robust public realm which would embody nature and biodiversity.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, it's from the outset on the Indigenous Hub project, we were really intrigued by the idea of what would happen if we think about the site, the city block, as a landscape first. And I think, that really did change how we thought about how we meet street edges, the relationship between visual connection to inner landscape from the street, and the kind of difference that could make at a city building level and a cultural level. And
Yeah, for us, it was really a learning experience, especially working with Matthew and recognizing that when we look at context, we don't look at the immediate context. Our clients, the elders in particular, asked us to think about this site long before Western colonization took place, and to think about it as a natural landscape upon which layers of human interaction were created, and to try to edge out of that process what it was originally. And we believe that way of thinking does in fact assist both in reconciliation but also in health.
Yeah, for us it's really about understanding that we are equal with nature. We're not above it, we don't control it, in fact we're dependent on it. And for architects this is kind of a hard thing to think about a lot because we're often displacing through our building all these other animals and our relations that keep us alive. So prioritizing space for placekeeping, space for our relations was one of the key aspects for this project for us as well.
I think one of the interesting things is what you're doing working with Indigenous people a pattern that can be repeated for other projects in Toronto or indeed further around Canada and indeed across the world where similar issues come up?
Yeah, I would say absolutely yes. And we work the same way with Indigenous clients that we work with non-Indigenous clients. And the values are the things we bring forward are important for not just Canada, but for everywhere around the world. So yeah, the answer is yes to that one.
It's interesting because one of the starting categories we had when we're looking at the WAF-X program is cultural identity. And each of your projects could equally well have been shortlisted under cultural identity because they're all recovering an identity for a particular sort of culture, a particular sort of community. And I think, even if again, I have to speak slightly on behalf of Simon Alford, who's had to go off, but, he's recovering something of the history, both by conserving the garden that was created by the inmates in the prison and by recording what happened to women inmates in this prison. Whereas what you're doing is also going back in history and looking at the occupation of the site or the use of the site before European colonisation, which, I don't know, when was Toronto founded as a European influenced city? Is it about 1800 or earlier?
Early, a bit earlier than that.
Yeah. But it's relatively new, even by North American standards.
When we say history,
Yeah.
we have learned to say it's history well before the colonial era.
Yeah, good. And of course, Malta has a very long history. Indeed, I think some of the oldest structures in Europe, human-made structures, are in Malta, the old temples. And what you were showing, sorry, I'm not going to get the pronunciation right, Zebuch, is it's almost like an African city rather than a European city, even a southern European city.
Yes, in fact, our culture is very much a mix of influences by whoever kind of was ruling the country throughout our history. From the ancient Romans, the Phoenicians, the Arabs, the Knights of St. John, the British, and even the French. Even our language is a bit of a mix-up of all of these things. And you see that very much in our architecture. We have towns which look very European, then we have towns which look very almost North African, very Mediterranean. And I think that played a big influence in our design. And I think what we're trying to do now is almost rediscover a little bit who it is that we really are.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time now, but thank you very much for fascinating presentations, and I hope the discussions can continue face-to-face, online or wherever, because I think you've raised some very interesting points. Thank you very much.
Thank you.